fought for them. We believed in them. And you know, at the end of the day, we were given a bait and switch. I had many conversations with ES2 board members who said that same thing, that they're all about protecting the people of Pflugerville. They said this passionately to me. And I find it hard to believe that because at the end of the day, it's all about money.
The subcommittee immediately scheduled a table meeting to begin conversations on contract negotiations. But before we could actually get to the table, they went to the media.
But the price hasn't really changed.
The price is the price. It's still $2.7 million.
We refuse to give unneeded additional tax dollars away for emergency medical services. I believe that the scare tactic is again on.
Acadian's contract is set to end in July.
Is to discuss and consider EMS for the city to include possible selection of a provider and negotiations therewith. We have Chief Perkins is here. Could you come forward and share your thoughts?
Good evening, council, mayor, staff. I just wanted to make sure you understand that Travis County ESD2 stands ready to continue negotiating with the city of Pflugerville to provide the best ambulance service and advanced life support services to the citizens of Pflugerville. That's all I have for you. Thanks.
Okay.
Following our last meeting, council's intentions were clearly stated to work together with ESD2 to perform a long-term financially viable partnership. I stand by those 8 reasons that council members listed at our last meeting for why we chose to begin negotiations with ESD2, including the quality of their service and connection to our community. The same day I submitted deal points based on the most recent proposal of 291,000. Representatives from ESD2 engaged the media and provided numbers that far exceeded what we had been told. We don't negotiate through the media. ESD2, without any clear justification, significantly increased that demand for additional taxpayer funding, making it impossible for me to recommend further discussion. Despite our best efforts, ESD2 has not provided a justifiable reason for that amount. As you can see on the screen, the proposal provided the city during interviews was $291,096 for ESD to provide EMS services. While ESD has never clearly justified any subsidy, I felt that that was reasonable, and that's why I brought it forward. There hasn't been consistency or clear justification for the additional tax dollars that ESD has asked for from the city of Pflugerville. Last year, ESD took in $14 million in property tax, $16 million in sales tax. This year, they will take in millions more. We're here because they no longer provide service to the residents within the city of Pflugerville unless the city gives them one of those. That is why I've decided to pass that information to our subcommittee, and I yield time to look for further direction.
Sliding scale. Do you have it up on here, Trina?
The sliding, the 291.
Billing?
You have it in front of you. I apologize.
Okay.
No, we have it in front of you.
That's okay. I was hoping the public would be able to see this. So I have a prepared statement, but I'm going to be kind of veering off here and there. So please hold just for a little bit with comments and questions, just like last time, right? First I'd like to talk about how we got here. When the good folks of Pflugerville overwhelmingly decided on no new tax, I was asked to meet at that time, right after the election. Soon afterwards, newly appointed Councilman Holiday met with them, and then shortly after that, the two of us, when we were put on this committee, along with Serena and their representatives, including Commissioners Vesner, Griffith, Chief Perkins, and others, were there. And we were presented with what I call a sliding scale. As an alternate solution. I was hoping it'd be up on here. But at this sliding scale, they talked about the possibility of increasing fees, the ESD increasing fees, which would offset the cost of that $2.whatever million. So if they increased fees, as you see on this, if you might see some of those, you have it, by 50%, then our overall cost to do business with the ESD would be $291,096. So we had a long discussion, many discussions about this. And, we went back and forth, and we talked about this in depth. This was the proposal that ESD2 presented us. We didn't come up with this proposal. ESD2 presented this to us. I'm saying that twice because I'll come back to that here in a little bit. This is a proposal championed by them, and finally a proposal that was given to us during the negotiation process. This was the negotiation process to find a new provider after we jointly decided to no longer do business with Acadian. And so I guess really at that time, I really want to restate it. I said it twice, but again, this was their proposal. They came to us. We talked about it, and we discussed the fact of who was going to do collections. We had this lengthy discussion about collections because one particular commissioner did not want to do collections. They said that was not the ESD's business, that should be Pflugerville's business, but they were okay with increasing fees. We made sure that they really wanted to go on board with this. So we started championing this. As you remember, Councilwoman Holliday and I, even opposed city council and others in this city to champion for them. We fought for them. We believed in them. And at the end of the day, we were given a bait and switch. In my opinion, when we were told $280,000, just under $300,000, then the proposal came back, as you can see on your screen. Is it right up there? Yeah. $2,900,000, That was the proposal that was brought back to us. As you can imagine, I was pretty furious, and I'm really trying to bite my tongue right now, and I'm talking really slow so that I don't make this a personal matter, as was suggested, because this is business after all. But it is personal because, we love the people of Pflugerville. We were here elected by the people of Pflugerville. We were elected to take care of the people of Pflugerville. I had many conversations with ES2 board members who said that same thing, that they're all about protecting the people of Pflugerville. They said this passionately to me. And I find it hard to believe that because at the end of the day, it's all about money. And let me state for 1 second real quick because I see Chief Perkins over here. This is coming from me, before anybody tries to use him as a scapegoat, don't. Chief Perkins is just somebody who's doing his job, and the good men and women at the fire department are doing their job to protect our lives every day. And for a moment, I want to take a moment and give them a hand. And I say this because nobody better, I say that incorrectly, but nobody had better accuse Chief Perkins or use him as a scapegoat. That would be wrong in my opinion, and I'm saying that publicly because I want to prevent that from happening. Therefore, when this proposition came to me, when did the question came before me, when did this change? When did the ESD switch from just under $300,000 to going back and reverting back to the $2.whatever million that had been discussed that the people of Pflugerville overwhelmingly turned down? So I asked myself, if the ESD board chose this, decided this was not the way to go, why did they champion this for over 6 months? And when did they decide to revert back to the original price? I ask this because there are no records that I can find of a public meeting or a public vote. In a little bit, I'd like to seek advice from our city attorney to see if any quorum rules were violated by them, because I'd like to know, when did they decide to take this vote? When did it happen? Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
You got
go
it?
ahead, go ahead.
Up there? Did she find it? All right. So at this point, I'd like to address the Travis County Court of Commissioners, particularly Commissioner Trevelyan and Commissioner Shea, who I respect incredibly. I'd like to make a personal appeal to them and ask them to please step in. At this time, we need your guidance. We need your leadership. I have been personally approached by and asked for meetings from everywhere from the ESD union to the ESD board, and while we were doing these negotiations, and I chose not to do it. Councilwoman Holliday will speak for herself, but she chose not to because we didn't want to damper the relationship, the negotiations themselves. But at this point, I'd like to know, commissioners, Commissioner Trevelyan, Commissioner Shea, how they came to this conclusion on their own. Where are the minutes for that meeting? When did they make this public? If they did have this meeting, why were we not invited so that we could make this appeal? And I say this because I truly do stand by ESD being one of the top, if not the top service here in Travis County. They are the best at what they do here in this area. I want to keep them. I fought for them. I mean, throughout this whole week, I have been approached by people thanking me for my stance on this, just to really have to feel brokenhearted knowing that we're probably not going to have to be able to do business with the ESD. I mean, that's so difficult for somebody to come up to you and they walk up to you and they say, thank you so much. And the vain me one thinks they're going to say, thank you so much for being a council member, or thank you for your service, or anything like that. And they say, thank you so much for bringing back the ESD. That broke my heart. That has broken my heart. So that part is a little personal, because I do care about the people of Pflugerville. I do care about them getting the best services. I do care so much about all of this. I know the Travis County Commissioners Court does as well. I know Commissioners Shea and Trevelyan do as well. So at this point, I'll say this. Please hold off on your emails, hold off on your texts to me, because the only people I really want to meet with at this time is Councilmember Shea or Trevelyan, along with Councilmember Holliday, and preferably Councilmember Mateo or Weiss, who've had to deal with this for quite some time.
All right, at our last city council meeting, the subcommittee recommended to begin negotiating with ESD2 with a vote of 6-1. The subcommittee immediately scheduled a table meeting to begin conversations on contract negotiations. But before we could actually get to the table, they went to the media. We cannot continue to work with a partner that doesn't show up at the table in full transparency and is continuing to increase the tax burden to our residents. The recommendation that I am going to make today is not based on the quality of service that Travis County ESD number 2 provides. It is because they refuse to fairly negotiate with us or understand the reality of the financial burden they're attempting to put on our residents. Their employees and their representatives have come to the city council asking for us to use their services, and we thought they were actually really ready to work with us. ESD number 2 is now asking for an outrageous amount of money from our residents to provide services to our community they chose to take on from Austin Travis County EMS. We hoped we could work together towards a unified future. However, we refuse to give unneeded additional tax dollars away for emergency medical services. I believe that the scare tactic is again on. With all this in mind, as a member of the Public Safety Subcommittee, I recommend that we end negotiations with Travis County ESD number 2 and enter into negotiations with Allegiance Mobile Health. They have a fleet of ambulance ready and agreed to provide service with no subsidy to the city of Pflugerville, and they stand eager to serve the Pflugerville community. I just want to say as well that what you see up on the screen is actually the scale that was given to me, and it's always been very present through all of our negotiations. So, yeah, so I would just like to say as well that I was extremely shocked when they came back with this new number. Yeah. And so we are changing our recommendation.
And I'll just add real quick, I mean, there was a statement put out today by the ESD2 board. It's on their website page. Two things I want to state. One, if you look down further, it'll say, first, let's see, we presented 2 options to the city to reduce the impact of the cost of the city's budget. They failed to say what those 2 options were, and they failed to say that they added an extra 0 basically to the original negotiations. Second, well, actually I have 3 things. The city would bill and collect higher fees from the city of Pflugerville residents who call 911 for advanced life support ambulance services. In my opinion, most of the Travis County ESD board members did not want us to handle collections. Only one of them did. Maybe that one person decided to go on ahead, was able to convince them to handle it, but that's false on here. It's just, you know, they're putting the ball in our hand. That's not true. Second, I spoke about Chief Perkins because I respect Chief Perkins tremendously. I'd like to speak about Serena. Serena has been wrongfully vilified by many people. And I don't appreciate that because she's been really working her tail off to provide the best services here in Pflugerville. There have been rumors out there that she has been directing us to do this or directing us to do that.
That is not true.
No. Councilwoman Holliday are elected officials who are elected by the people of this great city. They are the ones who direct us to do the thing, not Serena. She and her staff have been killing themselves to find the best solution. And if y'all forget, in case you forgot, her idea, I mean, it was, her number one solution was going back to the ESD and doing business with them because we were led by this sliding scale chart.
Well, I would also like to say that after the last meeting when we made the decision to continue or to enter into negotiations, I likewise got several emails thanking me and thanking us for moving in the direction that would take us back to in the hands of ESD2. There was a lot of confidence in the community with their service. And again, I am a firm supporter of the ESD2. They've provided excellent services over the years, but I was very disappointed to hear the news when we got the new number, the $2.9 million that was now on the table. And so I think, I think the board, when we say the commissioners, are the ESD Board of Commissioners, and I think they're the group that provide the direction and the policy for ESD2, and I think we need to hold them accountable for the public safety of our citizens.
Questions? So, thank you for all the supplemental information. This one, dated 5/18/2022, that lists the two options for the, and I don't know if we have a slide for this. And so, these two options here don't align with the two options that were in this public statement. Where did these two options come from?
That was what I was provided as a dollar amount after my deal points were provided.
By whom?
Chief Perkins.
Okay. And Chief Perkins, we can engage him. I think he's part of the negotiations. These two options that I'm looking at here, are you familiar with these, sir?
I don't have my reading glasses.
I just wondering. Oh, I think. Option one has an annual rate of 1.7. Option two has an annual rate of 2.9. Where did these come from, sir?
So those are the original figures in the spreadsheet that you guys are referencing. So you start at 2.9 million, you take off 1.2 for our standard fees. I had an additional $826,000 for interfacility cost offsets, and then we talked about what increasing fees would do, which could get you down to 300,000. So that's where that figure comes from.
Okay. And the decision not to change, and I'm assuming it's the billing rates that takes us down to the 300,000 or 291.
Yeah, and that's a forecast, a speculative forecast, but correct.
And
On top of the fees that we already charged.
But raising those rates, you were directed that wasn't going to happen, and to pursue the 1.7, the full amount.
No, so what you have before you are two options. So everything that's been stated here tonight, the option still stands. So I cannot speak for the board. I'm not authorized to do that. What I'm authorized to discuss is what's on that deal sheet. And that deal sheet is based in this spreadsheet. The risk would go to the city. So what we're saying here is, if you guys want to reach that number, you would have to assume the risk and the billing that goes with that.
Okay.
And my recollection is similar to what your recollection was, that was a small, just like you were a two-member of your body, we had a small two-member group from our body. So no one is speaking for the group. And there was some clear dissension on, comfort with fees. And not just talking about collections, I'm talking about fees. So these fees would make the city of Pflugerville the highest charged city in Travis County, the highest group of residents. And I want to remind you who calls us.
And that's the problem.
Can I finish up?
No, let me finish what I've got to say. That's the problem. The problem is this, is that there should not be any substantial, otherwise one way or the other, fee added on to what the services are with that. As our city manager just articulated regarding revenue forecast for sales tax as well as property tax is going to be in excess of, what would you say, $18 million?
I'll project that 16 million last year, if you were to take in, yes, around 18 million.
And did I hear that you said property tax was 14 and sales tax was 15 for the ESD? Because
16
16.
last year.
Because
Audited-
I recall
audited
the budget for that being 13 and 12 respectively, so that's $6 million
Those are-
over budget?
Those are audited numbers. Those are the correct numbers. 16
So,
million.
so they brought in $6 million of revenue in excess of budget?
Yes.
And be conservative in figures, absolutely, I get that, understand, respect that.
I do too.
But that doesn't make sense in essence, just like you said here, you said we'll have the highest fees. There's no support to the necessity of that. And that's the issue that is flabbergasting to the rest of us over here with that as well. And you can understand, I mean, let me be blunt with you. The two people who advocated the hardest for y'all are the ones saying, no, we're done. That's troubling. That's really, really troubling. And it has nothing to do with quality service, because you're right. I mean, our whole deal is that it shouldn't have to do with the quality services. But if we can't negotiate, can't talk in good faith over here with that, that's an issue. By 2/3, 2-1, this was voted down not only in the city but in the ETJ. And then the expectation was never for us to say, ha ha, you voted for this, we're going to go ahead and bring this back for that as well. I understand, you're right. You're doing your job, and you're right. He have to be the villain or anything else on this. But you can understand our frustration in trying to figure out, where's that slide that shows all the different numbers? Like, what is the number? I mean, that's the first one. And that even infuriates us even further, because that was the whole reason we got a third party here in the first place last year. So then we don't have to argue over this stuff. Say, hey, listen, this is what a third party found. This isn't us coming here, because we're not the SMEs. You're doing the jobs, and we respect everything else you do with the jobs. So then if we're saying we don't know, and you're saying, well, this is the number right here, and we get a third party that's saying, not only does there not need to be a subsidy, but in fact, you're going to be in the black for years to go, you can understand from our standpoint, how do we do well and do right by the citizens of Pflugerville with that? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that's where the frustration lies for us.
Well, we didn't even get to make it to the table, right, to talk about it before it was actually in the media. So it kind of gives the shock to those who
And
are
I
working
think to
with
that
it.
point that,
I mean, was
give
this
me
the-
give me one second, sir. And I think for me, the disconcerting part was for that statement to backtrack to a year ago's forecast, when here we are today and we know whether or not that forecast was accurate. And so instead of recalculating and saying, okay, based on sales tax collection, property values going up and new collections, and now the budget's different. It's not the same, it's different. And rather than recognizing what the new budget is and negotiating from that standpoint, making that public media statement going back to an old number, to me, is at best misleading. I'm just saying.
I'd like to say.
Can I?
Go ahead, Nick, go ahead.
So, back to the fees. Back to the fees.
And I want to talk about the fees.
So back to the fees. You got to know who calls 911 in your city. Okay, it's Medicare dependent people. It's people who don't have insurance, and then there's a small percentage of people that can pay. So, looking at fees, it's highly speculative. It really is. Okay, it's out there, and anybody that can tell you that, or that tells you that they can make accurate predictions based on billing alone, is not telling you the whole story. So it is highly speculative. So there's risk there, and that's kind of going back to that conversation. That's the point that I really want to make on fees. That's universally understood.
So to that point on fees, and to the point that we're worried about the some of the less economically available people making these calls for EMS service. You know, we did engage in a payer mix study, and that was done in the spirit of working together, regardless of who would benefit from that payer mix study. And in math, they say all models are wrong, but some models are useful. So we engaged someone who understood the market, because we're not the SMEs, we're not the subject matter experts, and we engaged someone who knew the market and calculated based on payer mix, based on private pay, based on Medicare, based on the folks who won't be able to pay, and I'm a bit offended by the notion that those folks who can't afford to pay are going to be charged higher rates, because we know full well that those who can't afford to pay are still not going to pay. Whether we're charging them higher rates or lower rates,
Yeah,
that's part of our
Medicare
non-collectible.
supplemental,
I'm sorry,
fixed,
that's part of our non-collectibles that we expect. When we run this model and we project increased fees, it's related on the market and the ability of the payer mix in our city based on our actual population. So I don't think we can argue that raising fees is going to disproportionately injure some folks' ability to call for service. So I don't want us to hang on that. I want us to make sure we go into this with clear eyes, that raising the fees is a strict business decision that helps make up the gap by those who have private insurance and the ability to pay. And I expect that the model to be accurate enough to provide a forecast and reliability to bring those numbers to bear.
I disagree with the study that you had done. You hired a consultant who's
Then why
not
did you
in-
give us the sliding scale that is seemingly based on that very study?
And Chief, the frustrating part about this is this.
We
And
need to be able to work together,
So-
right?
so agree,
He
but
hadn't been able to talk.
You hired
Can I give him a
consultant.
minute?
You hired a consultant from Colorado. He had no market awareness of Texas, let alone the Central
He had
Texas
3
region.
consultants in Texas.
You know, so Rich did the EMS evaluation study. No meetings with us, and he told you guys some really inaccurate information. One
We're not here to
being for you to
relitigate
charge
if you tried
ALS
to.
rates on all calls. That's illegal. You can't do that. It's Medicare fraud.
But let me ask you something, Chief.
And
Hold on.
you're here providing service and having people, what's your collection policy? 2 letters and a phone call? And that passes the smell test for Medicare?
Yeah, it's soft billings.
Well, let me ask this, let me jump in, because I know that
accepted
when we,
billing process across the
when
country.
we had this conversation with everybody, you were present, April and I and Serena were present, we talked about collection fees, and the one particular, I keep wanting to call them board members, but, because I'm confusing the commissioners and county commissioners, but one commissioner mentioned that they didn't want to do collections, and I asked why, and they said because they didn't want to look bad in the public. I'm just going to say it out there. That's this person's exact words. They didn't want to look bad to the public. You know, we needed to look bad to the public. But having said that,
Wait, what?
yes. Having said that, and you were there, correct? Am I incorrect in saying this, in your opinion, or am I just want? If I'm wrong, if I am inaccurate, then I will apologize. But I believe myself to be accurate in that statement. And so we discussed that sliding scale. Everybody seemed to be in agreement with that sliding scale, that if fees were increased by 50%, that this would be our cost. And during the negotiation process, Serena had asked you, are you still okay with that cost? And you say, I'm confident I can convince them. But now we have this. How did we go from that to this? Was that a board commission?
That is still in there. So I want to make sure you all understand. In option 2, that is the deal on the table.
Option 2 shows me $3,718,000.
So you take the 1.2 that we currently do in EMS billing, we land on the highest rate that you all want to do on the sliding scale. We add the transfer service, and we can get down to that number. But again, what I'm trying to tell you is it's highly speculative to do that. and there's risk associated with that.
But sir, you're not adding increased sales tax collections, you're not adding
So,
increased ad
so we
valorem.
brought several other topics. So when we want to talk about increases to our budget, what's lacking is the increased demand and services that are going to be delivered with those increases. So to say that we're just taking in more revenue and we're not increasing our services, it's not an accurate statement.
Can
So
you
understand-
give me a picture then? Because I think what I heard so far was that original projections were 12 million sales tax, 13 million in property tax, and we came in at 15 and 16 million respectively, or maybe I've got that backwards. But still,
those are audited numbers.
but still, what was the difference in the expenses over that same period, budget to actual?
So I did not come here prepared to do a budget
Okay.
presentation.
No, that's
with you.
okay,
I'm
that's okay.
happy to
That's
do
fine,
that
but if you're making
because
the
what
argument
is-
that it's based
No,
on
no,
increased services, then you need to make sure you can back that
But-
up, because
but
that
what is
was
lacking-
revenue over and above budgeted revenue. That was revenue over and above what you expected to do, and that revenue does not necessarily have, when you budget conservatively, that your expenses are high and your revenue is low. And if you're telling me that the revenue exceeded by, what is that, almost 6 million, so that's 30%, and you got to be able to tell me what your expenses
So
were.
what I'd like to tell you, call volume over last year up 36% alone, all right? I've added almost 3 minutes to my response times. We are behind. We have put growing the fire department, which is what we are, on hold to solve the EMS issue in the community. We tried to do it. We tried to do it as partners years ago with this, not with you all.
Not this
You were
council.
involved.
I was
Some
on-
of you were involved.
Commissioner, yeah.
We tried to solve this, and we wound up alone holding the football, and we did our best for as long as we could. We're at a point we can no longer do it. So yeah, there are increases to budget, but we have not addressed the demand. We have not.
But Nick, that's the problem. And you're right. I was on the other side. I was a commissioner over there, and we said explicitly, "Hey, listen, this is what we can do." Chief gives prior chief, he gave us a projection. Hey, listen, we can handle this on our own. We can go from there. What the problem is that we have outkicked our coverage on property tax and sales tax projections for years after that fact. And to Councilmember Weiss's point, that's the problem. And I get it. You weren't here to talk about the budget. I can understand.
I would love to do that presentation because that's what's missing.
But the frustration,
You know what, that would be a great presentation for us to have during a joint meeting.
yeah, because
Could we do that?
Because that's the question.
Could
The
we do
question-
that?
You can understand where the question comes. It's like, wait a minute, there's $6 million. You can't tell me that your cost went up 6 million, or you could.
I
mean, that's
I
what
had
I'm
$1 million
saying.
in COVID expense alone
That's
last year. I mean, just COVID.
What we're saying is that that's the part that is trying to understand and trying to better understand the whole lay of the land with that. You mentioned that that's the price tag, but I see something about non-emergency calls would take away, and I guess you said the transfers, interfacility transfers.
Yeah.
So, talk more about that. What
So
do you,
that,
what
so
are you
that's an
asking for?
enterprise we don't currently do.
Okay.
We do it on occasion when the privates can't do it.
So how come you don't?
Well, currently, we're not set up to do that for a few reasons. There's some additional equipment you need to buy. There's some training, some processes that need to be
Additional
done.
staffing, I imagine.
But yeah, but at the end of the day, we before January, our system was built to do 911 service. Taking that on would be an extra demand on our folks.
And to be fair, I understand, when I was on a commissioner, I remember explicitly talking about that because I worked for Health and Human Services and I did non-emergency transfer. I understand the whole market with that as well, and you all would be a welcome commodity in that market. I'll leave it at
No,
that.
we know, we work,
Yeah.
and it's something we've always wanted to do within the ER.
I'm not saying that. Part of this too, the discussion we still haven't talked about, which is a point that Councilman McDonald and I brought up last time, is whoever we go with, we cannot pass this on to another council. We have to
I agree.
build toward
Right.
actually having our own internal EMS services, whoever it is, because this is like if the police department told us, okay, nope, sorry, this is our price tag. We're not, if we can't get in a fight with our own police department.
Well, Chief, let
and
me
that's
ask you
the
this.
frustrating part with this.
And you said in option 2 is where the possibility of that, we could reach that 290-something thousand. But it says the city would establish their own billing rates, processes, and policies, and service providers in the city of Pflugerville boundaries, and all building and revenue would be managed and owned by the city. But never, with the exception of that one commissioner, never did this discussion ever come up that that was the route we were going to go.
Yeah, and I don't, and to be fair, Councilman, I don't think we ever got that far in the conversation, because had I been able to negotiate with Ms. Breland, that has to be part of the conversation, because of, I almost think y'all would prefer to do that. Billing is a nightmare, I understand that, but that risk association, because we could do this several ways, where if we take on the risk, then we would have to do a true-up, and that has to go in the contract. We have that in our other contracts. So that's not, it's not this crazy out of the question thing for us. That's how we do business. That's how most 911 providers in this region do it when they do contracts.
And I get it, but I'm just
if you don't want
asking.
to do a true-up, then you take all the files and then you carry everything.
I get it, but I'm just asking, why did this not even come up in the negotiation process when y'all are here? And we were talking about this, that, oh, yes, we're going to reach the 291, but y'all have to be officially the bill collector as far
Well, I
as.
think, to be fair, when we're having informal meetings with two members of a council, two members of a board, that's not negotiating. I think those are discussions, that those are understanding, education areas.
Didn't we have RFP interviews? That seems like a pretty official
They are.
conversation,
So-
and
But again, we haven't had the opportunity to sit down and discuss all the details that would go into
again,
the
that would be a
contract.
great joint meeting.
And that's what Chief, that's what he's saying. He's saying because we had two or three RFP processes. I mean, yeah, RFI and RFP. So that's what they're saying. Those are the formal discussions. And negotiations.
Well, I'll just tell you,
I
I
understand
just
what you're saying.
negotiated a contract with the county. I'm negotiating a contract right now with another group. Typically, you're selected, which is what I participated in, which is what I believe y'all are describing. You then go to the table, and then you negotiate the details. I started that with Ms. Breland last week, and had one meeting and one phone conversation.
And-
In my mind, there was a meeting set up with Councilman Ruiz and Councilman Holliday with two of our board members. I envisioned us getting to the table and having that discussion and going through all these details to talk about risk and talk about speculation and what that entails.
And I
But
get
to
that.
my understanding, that meeting was canceled
Okay.
by the city.
That
And
meeting
so-
was set up by us.
We canceled that.
We set it up, we canceled it because we were told that the negotiation process had started and that you weren't budging on this final number, and that you might have even said something to the effect of y'all undervalued yourself? Is that correct?
I don't know if I use the word undervalue.
So.
There's just
but
a
that-
real, I'll
that
speak.
You weren't bending.
Well, there's
and that
there's
you
a
weren't-
big
there was a
difference
reset of
between
expectations.
2.9 million and 280,000.
That's the bottom
But,
line.
so I came to y'all to say 2.9
But
is a
it's
little
explained in
hefty.
that spreadsheet. It shows
Absolutely it
how
is.
you get there. So
I
it didn't
agree.
come out of nowhere. It's been in the
we know.
spreadsheet the whole time. What's been lacking is a really in-depth conversation that I would assume would take place during a negotiation, which I've done. And the other thing too, to be fair, Councilman McDonald talking about our board member going to the news, that was on a Monday, all right? She was using a figure that was accurate. It was a little old, but it was accurate. On Tuesday, we secured a deal with Travis County that affected the figure, and it got it down.
So you brought that up. Here's a frustrating part. Okay. So Travis, and this is to your point, to have with the commissioners, because I'm going to go through that as well. $800,000 is authorized for services specifically in the ETJ. While the city, the citizens in the city and the ETJ will continue to supplement and pay for, because our tax dollars go there, to services that go toward that, to your budget, even though you're getting that other $800,000. Frustrating about that is because any conversation we've had before that is saying, hey, listen, is that possible? Is that feasible? And that has not been the case.
Councilman
All of a sudden,
McDonald, let
it
me
happens
ask you,
that as
I mean,
well.
Councilman Matera, let me ask you, of all the 24 cities in Travis County, do you know how many of them receive county money for EMS?
EMS service.
23.
Yeah.
23. So
We're the only ones who
we're-
don't.
We're the only one. So you can understand, and that's not you. You can understand the frustration on our part when we hear numbers like that and think, okay, so what's the difference here? Why is that the case?
The
with
difference
that
is
flow?
the demand. So when Travis County was operating in Pflugerville, 40% of the calls were in northeast Travis County. Okay, so the demand, based on the population out here, it's huge. And so you've heard the figure too, you know, Pflugerville's larger than the two other cities in Travis County combined, not including Austin. All right, so there's a big demand for service
But
up
here's
here.
an issue. We just did that study and we found out the majority of our calls are I'm sorry. I will always think of myself as commissioner. ESD's calls are in the Wells Branch
That's
area.
not true. That's not
significant.
true. It is 50, it is by plus or 1%.
Oh, okay.
In the city, outside
okay,
the city.
so it's 5149.
Yeah.
You don't think that should be substantially taken into consideration
I'll
for
go-
our purposes?
I'll
if
go
we're
back to
talking
what
about that?
what we originally had proposed, where you all were involved, is a three-way partnership. That's the way we solve this, and we now have two parts of it.
But here's the problem, Chief. I think that I agree that it should be partnerships that we should be looking at for, but we cannot pass this on to another council without serious guideposts that have a transition to this. We talked about hard decisions and how you have, as elected officials, you're gonna make hard decisions and what you're gonna do, what's right. This is wrong. This is wrong to be arguing with a fire department regarding services for your citizens. That's just wrong. That is not the way government should do it. That's not an expectation from our citizens. Just like you said, we all should be working together.
And
We need
we're
to make
there.
sure,
We're-
we need to make
we're-
sure that, we need to
we're
make
on-
sure
we're
that
on the 1-yard
it's a
line.
true transition in place, phasing in to make that happen with the guidepost over here.
And I'll even add, Councilman, that I'll apologize to you, Chief, and I'll apologize to Serena. You two have been put in a difficult position, because really, you two have been put in the position of negotiating this when it should really be this body and their body. But unfortunately, we have tried many, many times to meet with their body to do any types of
Well, there was
negotiations.
a meeting
Let me,
scheduled.
let me
Well,
point
that
out,
was scheduled between us two.
Councilmember Ruiz, how many
Why did we
of the
cancel?
contracts that we have, how many of the contracts that were on consent agenda tonight, how many of those have we negotiated?
That's a good point.
Oh, that's true.
No. Staff,
They
we
negotiate.
entrust staff with that job, and they
That
do a
is true.
damn fine job.
Yeah.
And they bring to us a negotiated deal that then we say we like it or we don't.
And that's the point. That's what I'm bringing up, is because she could bring it to us and we could say, no, throw it away, and then we blame her.
But we set guidelines, as we often do, and we said, this is where $300,000, it's like a good deal. We heard all of the accolades that y'all had that you brought to us from negotiations with the review of the RFPs. You said ESD2 is the best decision. And I firmly believe that they had the best quality of service
Yes.
that we looked at the right price point.
Right,
But
and
that price point suddenly,
changed,
in my perspective, changed.
yeah.
Okay? And then, you said, the commissioner made a statement Monday, which referred back to an old number, but then we hear you got $800,000 on Tuesday, and then the number went up
No,
on
it
these
didn't.
options.
So the two options you have in front of you, it's the same number. I think I've repeated it.
That's-
many times.
I know you
And-
say that, but
Chi-
I wanna make
I'm
sure
an
it's
engineer, sir, and
understood.
I'm seeing two different numbers on here.
Right,
Well-
so there's option one, and then there's option two that you guys are referencing with this spreadsheet that shows.
I think if I may speak, if I may, I think what he's trying to say, that it really was your responsibility to let us know that there was more to that option than what's written on this piece of paper.
And again, I
Am
thought a
correct,
meeting was
Councilman?
gonna occur. My
Well,
understanding
you
is
know
a
what, you
meeting-
keep mentioning that, and I just want to say, we did set up that meeting, and the reason we canceled that meeting is before we could get there, there was a media release, which is going to be totally in conflict with what we were going to be talking about. That was not what we were going to the
Oh, we had
table
to put
about
out
on.
fires with that. There are council members right here who wanted to stop all
They
negotiations
thought
because of that KVU.
Yeah, they thought that we were doing something, that we knew a number because that's not what we talked about.
It
This is
poisoned the
never-
negotiations.
this
So
is never-
apparently, there were two lines of communication here, and one of them, whether it was in error or negligent or misdirected, was what caused your action. But I think what I hear you saying, Chief, is the 291 is still on the table.
Yes, sir, that's what yeah, thank you.
If-
We're starting at that figure. It has our current billing, it adds the line of service with transfers, and then where we want to go with the sliding scale. I'm just saying, there is speculation and risk with playing with those fees.
Right.
So I'm gonna go back to Councilmember Holliday's motion that I heard at the end of her statement.
Recommendation.
Recommendation.
I heard a recommendation, and I would wonder if that recommendation had two parts to it. Had one part was to cease negotiations with ESD2, and it had a second part of opening negotiations with, I think you said, Allegiance. That recommendation, if we curtail it to additionally opening up negotiations with Allegiance, and then having a negotiated, if we can set up a meeting, have a negotiated prospect from ESD2 and a negotiated proposal from Allegiance. And we look at those side by side, and we understand private versus public. And we understand that there may be some disparities God, I can't speak all of a sudden. Disparities in service, or maybe not, right? There's a perception there in terms of public versus private. There's a huge perception in quality of service when we see the existing service provider that we have parked in the entryway to my neighborhood, as opposed to parked in a facility with beds and accommodations, right? There's a disparity in service perception there. And so let's get past that. Let's continue with negotiating in terms of whatever that 3-year, 5-year, 10-year transition plan. I don't know the numbers. I'm not the expert, right? In terms of how do we take this service and wrap it into the city's envelope in terms of providing our taxpayers cost savings in terms of administrative overhead, IT, HR, all these accounting, all these services, and pull this EMS burden off of ESD2, which I continually hear has been originally taxed with, chartered with providing first responder EMS service, fire service. I was driving down Heatherwild the other day, and there was I still think of it as Ridgecrest or Ridgemont, but it's now Rosemont. It's now Stone something. They changed the name of it on North Heatherwild, just north of Pecan. And there was an emergency call there, and already in the parking lot was the giant fire truck. And coming south on North Heatherwild was the private ambulance, and so you see things like this, and they make a point, and I'm not making a point, I'm just rambling, but I think that we need to proceed with, again, and I will continue to offer this olive branch or whatever you want to call it in terms of trying to negotiate in good faith, without like throwing random numbers out, without going to the media and making statements that are incendiary, right? Not your fault, no fault on you. If someone, anyway, so attempting to continue those negotiations, but also opening up negotiations with Allegiance. Maybe there's a little friendly competition there. I don't know.
So,
right? But to put a little more fire there. Right.
Councilmember McDonald, I'm going to tell you, and Nick as well. I keep mentioning joint meetings, and I really do mean that in the spirit of working together. I think this contract, the reason why staff is not exclusively negotiating this contract is because this is solving a generational issue. We know that EMS was not sustainable several years ago, and you went out and got additional sales tax funding. EMS is not sustainable now, and you're looking for additional funding. And then this will likely, in another 5 or 10 years, once again, we will discover this method is unsustainable, and we'll be passing the problem to another council to solve. And what I keep hearing from this council is that we want to help us solve this permanently. We want to provide sustainable long-term service for our citizens. I know I've talked about other ways in which we can cooperate, whether that's with shared services for finance, shared services for HR, whether that, I know I keep hearing there are issues with the ability to issue bonds for capital investment, and we can do that, and maybe we can do that, and you guys can cover the debt service, and then you free up cash flow and long-term, and then what we're fond of saying, growth pays for itself. We build those facilities and we let the new growth fund the new facilities. There are so many ways that we can work together. But I got to tell you, I keep feeling like Charlie Brown and Lucy's holding the football. At least 3 times last year, I got a commitment from the board that we were going to have a joint meeting, and 3 times it was rescinded. And it is the end of May. We don't have a whole lot of time.
Nope.
And we've got a whole lot to get done if we're going to work together. I don't have confidence that we can get all that done in, the next 6 weeks? To come together and finalize a deal or to get anywhere close to deal points and term sheets that say where we all want to go together. I say our job here on council is not to get us there, it's to point where we want to go. And I think our ESD commissioners, they're probably pointing at a slightly different place, but hopefully we're pointing in the same direction. I don't think we can get there in 6 weeks. And I think we got to find someone else to hold that football so we can kick it and close out this game.
It's unfortunate.
Okay. I was thinking about your analogy, but you bring up a salient point, which I think is really important because both of y'all said it from 2 different sides of the same coin. It's unsustainable for the ESD to provide EMS services, is what they're saying, and we need. Without additional funding, and it's likely. I think we got in our projections. It's likely to ask for funding again in another 2 years, 3 years or so. Right there, it's a continuing process.
We don't have that in our forecast.
So for our purposes, what we're trying to do is trying to figure out. Don't Doug, just let it go. From our standpoint, we need to try something sustainable, and something sustainable will be under the city's auspices umbrella. Whatever that looks like, we've got to start that process now. You're right, okay? I can completely understand the frustration saying, hey, listen, we talked about this 5 years ago. We're not there 5 years ago. We're here now, and what we're saying as a council is that we've got to make sure that we make true, strong posts, immutable posts that will move us forward toward ultimately having something in service that the city can go and take care of. Bonding, all the other aspects that we can do, the tools that we have in place, but we've got to start building in that now. I'd like for that to be built with the ESD. That's what I'd like to do. And the problem has been the conversations have just gone left all the time. And it's so infuriating because it just doesn't really make sense why that's the case with that. We're not, again, you're not the scapegoat. Frankly, I kind of want to tell you to sit down so people don't look at you being the problem, because you're not the problem. I'm saying that this is what the issues are. So how do we make it move forward with that? I mean, Councilmember McDonald, what you just said about allegiance and ESD2, well, if we're going to do that, we might as well talk about Austin Travis EMS. Because
I think they were the first. I could disagree because they were the first one that we looked at on that spreadsheet. I think they were the most expensive.
And that's why we.
And that's why we, even though they had an equal quality of service, they were even more expensive than ESD2. So no, sir.
And my concern is this: is that I think that Austin Travis EMS, you can have a conversation with the Commissioners Court saying, hey, listen, you're providing services everywhere else. This is what our funding's going for. And do that. I get what you're saying. I completely get what you're saying about that. I think that what we're saying is that we can't keep this exclusive in what we're doing because we've been waiting a couple more weeks.
So it is out of my immense respect for ESD2 that I'm asking that we continue to try to have a conversation with them. I personally, to Councilmember Weiss's point, I don't think we have the bandwidth in the next 6 weeks to negotiate 3 deals. I really don't know that we have the bandwidth to negotiate 2, but hopefully we will send a message to the ESD2 commissioners that we need to have that joint meeting immediately, right? And I know
Free next week.
I'm free next week as well, right? And we'll get a quorum and we'll figure it out. But if this is truly an issue of quality of service, then I'm sure your commissioners will step up and be happy to meet with us and bring updated budget forecast and be prepared to negotiate and answer the hard questions. If not, we need to be ready to start negotiating, and I see a front row filled with people here wearing Allegiant shirts. We need to be prepared to negotiate with someone and create a sustainable solution for our citizens so that they're not left without an EMS provider.
And let's make it
And I heard that Allegiance could step up in 2 weeks, so, I mean, if we have that 2-week window.
That was 2 weeks ago, though, I bet.
Get a contract together.
Do
I'm
y'all
not-
do y'all have any
entertain a motion?
questions for me?
Okay.
'Cause,
No,
No, we
you
appreciate
no,
it. I mean,
I know, I'm sorry.
Hey, look, I'm all for maintaining negotiate dialogue.
Thank you, Chief.
The dialogue, when it comes to negotiations, needs to include
Transparent dialogue.
transparency. It needs to include Serena. It needs to include Chief Perkins, not just a few of us.
Okay, so Serena's got a great
Well, then,
question.
Okay.
sure. Nick and I can go to lunch, talk about things, but if you're not gonna authorize over 291,000, it's moot.
Right.
Right,
So-
and that's kind of where but what I hear is, I hear a couple of different things, and I'm not gonna stress them out by asking them to come back, but I hear that that somehow or another, the $1.7 million is the 291,000. And I'm struggling in my head to understand it because I do math, and that's not the same number. But it is from his perspective. I don't understand that perspective from here, but I'm sure it could be explained to me, and then I could either say yes or no. And so I think the next, I would suggest that the next step in our negotiations with ESD2 is a joint meeting. If we can't get a joint meeting on the table next week.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. Absolutely, right? If we can't get a joint meeting on the table next week, we're kind of at a standstill as far as staff has been authorized to negotiate, whether that's Chief Perkins or with Serena Breland, what y'all have been authorized to negotiate on.
But it's not just the 291,000.
I'm with you. I don't
Because
understand.
they-
that's a starting point. for
Well,
me.
not only that, it's not just about the money, it's about them wanting us to control the billing. And I think that we have to
yes,
have a
sir.
serious conversation about that.
I understand that there's some immediate points that are deal breakers, but if we can at least get a joint meeting with the SD2, they're listening to us, or they're watching the recordings, or they're getting a report back from staff, and they'll know that we want to have a talk, but we know that there's certain guidelines that they have to stay within. But in the meantime, I think we need to be sitting down with Allegiance and saying, okay, here's the contract. We talked with y'all, I don't know, months ago, and where are we at with that, and what's that look like? And start looking at that contract in terms of what do they think in terms of a transition period?
And, yeah, I'll just add
Where
too.
are they gonna park their trucks?
I agree, and I agree with everything you say, and I'll just add too, I mean, I've been told personally, I'll never have a joint meeting with Pflugerville, the city council, because if David Rogers is there, I'll never be there. You know, it's time to put our big boy pants on, big girl pants on, and let's go to work for the people of Pflugerville.
That's what we did when we authorized staff to open negotiation with ESD2. It was 6-1, but the body chose to move forward to try to negotiate a settlement. So I'll make a motion if you're ready for one.
I'd just like to add, is that if the 291 is 291,000 is with us doing the billing, that's a no-go. I mean, we can't,
Well, that's part of the negotiation with.
that's it, that's what I'm saying. In my opinion, that's a no-go. I mean, we can do that.
Mr. Mayor, will you entertain a motion?
Sure.
I move that we adopt Councilperson Holliday's recommendation.
What was the recommendation?
Yeah,
It was without Jim's recommendation that we
yeah,
keep
no,
negotiating.
I modified her recommendation.
Friendly amendment.
And so modifying,
Well, there's no second yet.
there's no
No,
second
yeah.
yet, so we'll just let it hang.
5 seconds.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, discussion.
So now we're gonna take a friendly amendment?
Yep.
Uh,
If the,
That
go
we
ahead.
drop, so it's much simpler to make a cleaner motion, but.
Yeah, shall we dispense with it?
So the amendment would be to the effect of restating the motion.
So a friendly amendment must be accepted by the original mover.
So, right, and so the friendly amendment would be that that instead of suspending negotiations with ESD2, which was Councilmember Holliday's recommendation, that we seek a joint meeting with the ESD2 commissioners to continue negotiations with is a 1 week or 2 week timeframe?
10 day.
1 week.
10-day,
Yeah.
10-day timeframe. I think that covers it.
But we need to make sure we give the city manager some parameters to negotiate with. I mean, we've said we're not going over 300,000. So what is that?
This would be a joint meeting between this body and ESD2, and so we will be having those conversations directly with their commissioners.
Because they're the ones authorized to direct that policy.
Right, and if the agenda is written as such as discuss and take action, at the end of that meeting, we could potentially have an ILA signed, or at least a framework for an ILA to move forward with, because we could all vote on it right then and there.
We don't have a whole lot of time. Let me just put that.
That's why I time box it with 10 days for ESD2, but also, does that make sense?
I hear what you're saying.
Go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead.
As the mover, I will accept the friendly amendment and see what the will of the council is.
Okay, so I'd like to have this. We're saying parameters. We need to have a timeline too, because if things go
Right.
south for the umpteenth time, what does that look like? Because we've got to have a contract in place
Well,
by, Charlie, is it July?
Yeah.
But the intent was to bring this to you on June, tell me the second Tuesday, 16th? 14th?
14th?
So
Like a circle.
I wanted
Yeah,
a
that's-
contract finished. That's
Right.
not the same as by June 14th.
Right, and so I think we can, and guide me if I'm wrong, but I think with moving forward with negotiations and discussions with Allegiance, we can meet that deadline. In terms of the joint meeting and coming to terms with an agreement, the commissioners should be aware of our intentions by now to have that joint discussion and to have that agreement by that timeline. If they can't meet that, then they can't meet it. But that gives us two options, both hopefully would be competing to.
And so that puts the accountability back on the ESD board commissioners where it should be. And if they're not willing to step up and work with us as they've said so in the past many times, then we know where we stand.
And I think that that's the point that Mayor Pro Tem Weiss, Mayor's brought up,
I believe the
Councilmember
polite
Rogers
way to
brought
say
up
it
too.
is fish or cut bait.
Yeah.
And before you call the vote, Mayor, I'd like to go back to my original request. I request Travis County Court of Commissioners, one of them, Shea or Trevelyan or both of them, please be there. I mean, be present, so that you can.
Well, we can make
there's
that
some accountability.
request,
We
but.
can- Yes, we can
you know,
make it
whether
happen.
We
It seems
can't
important
demand
enough.
they be there.
Well, they did invest $800,000, so I think they have and plus the additional tax revenue that's
Does
going to the.
Does everybody understand the motion and the friendly amendment?
No.
So I'll go open my mouth and ruin this whole meeting.
Okay.
This is how I understood the motion, and I'm doing this for Serena, for clarification. My understanding of the motion is that, as with the friendly amendment that you have accepted, is that Serena will cease negotiations with Chief Perkins at this point in time, but reach out to attempt to get a meeting to be held between this body and the ESD Commissioner's body within the next 10 days. She will, however, begin negotiations with Allegiance in the hopes of having an agreement that could be in place and ready to go in case it is you are unsuccessful with respect to this body meeting with ESD2.
Within those
That's
10
how I
days.
understood it.
Did I tell you how much I like this guy?
That's why we pay him the big
Really
bucks.
smart.
Right.
That is correct.
And what great hair.
And you worded that so well.
I totally envy his hair.
You're
Okay,
welcome,
I think
Serena.
the amendment, the friendly amendment, the motion, the second, the friendly amendment has been clarified by our legal counsel. Let's move forward with the vote, please. Mayor Pro Tem Weiss.
Yes.
Mr. Ruiz.
Yes.
Ms. Holliday.
Yes.
Mayor votes yes. Mr. Mateer.
I'm gonna trust whatever it says was actually what we were talking about. Yes.
Mr. McDonald.
Yes.
And Mr. Rogers.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Wow.
Thank you.
Okay. I mean, we've got a short time, just being real, we have a short timeline, and we gotta give our staff enough time to be able to go
Ask
ahead and
that
pivot off
question.
of there.
So you're leaving it to me to figure out how to get 13 people in the same day
Well,
and
so-
time?
So what I'm going to tell you is that my
Like-
calendar shows a budget work session next Tuesday. Is
that
that
correct?
is that
I
accurate?
think
Was
that's
it Tuesday or
correct.
Thursday?
Tuesday.
Tuesday, the 31st.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because it's a fifth Tuesday.
There you
So
go.
we're already scheduled on
Oh.
Tuesday.
there you go.
31st.
If we need an extra hour or two,
Or 2 or 3 or however
Whatever,
many things.
I think we will commit to whatever it takes to make sure that we can bring the best
that's
service to
what
the
we signed up
citizens of
for when we
Pflugerville.
put our names on that ballot.
Yes, sir.
If we're still here at midnight, you're buying the beer.
Okay, so, all right.
Goodness. Good Lord, where are we at?
We're on item, let's see, we've already done the, okay.